A few days after I bought my first house, my dad called me in anger and said it's selfish of you to buy that house without discussing it with the family. I couldn't stop laughing, as if I bought it with your money. I stood alone in a dining room I'd spent 10 years dreaming about, staring at a table set for 5A roast chicken, going cold and silver balloons spelling home that were already starting to sag. And I realized I wasn't sad. I was done. That's different. Sadness wants resolution. Done is a door closing, a lock turning. A sound so quiet you almost miss it. Except it changes everything that comes after. My family was supposed to be there an hour and 47 minutes ago. My mother's text, the only communication I'd received, sat on my phone like a slap. Sorry, something came up. Busy tonight. 5 words. No call, no explanation, no congratulations on the biggest achievement of your life. 5 words for 10 years of work. I put my phone face down on the counter. Then I picked up the lemon tart I'd spent 3 hours making from scratch. My grandmother's recipe, the one I'd learned at 13, the one I'd thought might make my mother smile, and I dropped it into the trash. The thud it made was the most honest sound I'd heard all night. My name is Madison Carter. I turned 30 the March before I bought that house. And I'd spent nearly my entire 20s building toward one single specific, almost embarrassingly concrete goal. Owning a robin's egg blue house with a white fence and an oak tree in the front yard. I know how that sounds. Believe me, I've heard every version of it. That's not a financial plan. That's a Pinterest board. You're 30 and you've never been to Europe. Live a little Maddie. That last one was my brother Kevin's favorite. Kevin, who was 33, who'd never had a savings account that lasted longer than a season, who cycled through apartments the way other people cycled through Netflix shows. Kevin, who once told me at Thanksgiving in front of our parents, our aunt, our cousin, that I treated money like a religion and fun like a sin. Everyone laughed. I smiled. I went home that night and transferred another $1,200 into my house fund. Here's what they never saw. The $38,000 I'd saved by age 25 while working help desk at an IT firm in Raleigh, a city where I knew exactly no one. The $16 an hour starting wage that I'd clawed up to $31 by switching companies twice, getting 2 certifications, CompTIA Security Plus, and AWS Solutions, Architect, and saying yes to every overnight shift nobody else wanted. The studio apartment I lived in for 4 years that was so small, I could touch both walls if I stood in the middle and stretched out my arms. The used 2014 Honda Civic I drove until the odometer read 187,000 miles. The meal prep Sundays, the library books instead of streaming subscriptions. The discipline that looked from the outside like deprivation. It wasn't deprivation. It was architecture. I was building something. And on March 22nd at 2:15 p.m., sitting in a title company conference room in Asheville, North Carolina, I signed my name 43 times, handed over a cashier's check for $47,600. My down payment, no co-signers, no family money, not a single dollar I hadn't earned. And the attorney, a woman named Diane Prescott, slid a single brass key across the table and said, "Congratulations, Miss Carter. It's yours." I held that key in my palm, and I felt the weight of a decade lift off my chest. The house was $289,000. A 3-bedroom craftsman bungalow on Laurel Ridge Drive with robin's egg blue siding, a white picket fence, hardwood floors, a wraparound porch with a swing, and I swear this is true, a 70-year-old oak tree in the front yard that looked exactly like the one I'd drawn in colored pencil when I was 9 years old. I still have that drawing. It's in a frame now hanging in the hallway. The first thing I wanted to do was share it. Not on social media, not with coworkers, with my family. I know how that sounds given what happened. But you have to understand the wanting wasn't rational. It wasn't strategic. It was the same instinct that makes a kid run inside after catching a firefly. Look what I found. Are you watching? I'd been running inside my whole life with my hands cupped around something glowing. And every time my family would glance up, shrug, and go back to whatever they were doing. But this time would be different. That's what I told myself. This time, the thing in my hands was too big to ignore. So I sent a message to the family group chat. Me, my parents, Sharon and George and Kevin. I typed it carefully. I included a photo of me standing on the porch holding the key, smiling so hard my face hurt. Hey everyone, I officially closed on the house today. I'm hosting dinner this Saturday at 7 o'clock to celebrate. I'd love for you all to be there. Address below, it would mean the world to me. My mother replied, "Oh, wow, okay." Kevin sent a thumbs up emoji. My father didn't respond at all. I told myself that was fine, that they'd come, that showing up was what mattered, not the texting. Saturday arrived. I cooked all day, roast chicken with thyme and lemon, my father's favorite. garlic mashed potatoes, green beans with almonds, homemade rolls, the lemon tart. I set the dining table with plates I'd bought specifically for this night. White ceramic, nothing fancy, but new clean mine. I bought flowers, yellow tulips, and put them in a glass pitcher because I didn't own a vase yet. I lit candles. I hung the silver balloons. I even put a playlist on my Bluetooth speaker. Soft jazz, the kind my mother used to play in the kitchen when I was small, back when the kitchen still felt like a safe place. By 6:30, the house smelled incredible. The table looked like something from a magazine. If the magazine was for people who had more hope than sense. At 7 I sat down. At 7:05 I checked my phone. Nothing. At 7:15 I texted, "Hey, dinner's ready whenever you guys get here." No reply. 7:30. My knees started bouncing under the table. The candles had burned down a 1/4 inch. The chicken was cooling. I adjusted the tulips twice. 7:45. I called my mother. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called my father. Same. I called Kevin. He picked up on the 3rd ring. I heard background noise, a bar maybe, music, laughter. "Hey, Maddie, what's up? Dinner at my house tonight." A pause. The kind of pause that tells you everything before the words do. "Oh yeah, I think Mom said something came up. I figured it was pushed." "Who pushed it? I didn't push it." "I don't know, Look, I'm out with some people right now. Can we do it another time?" He hung up before I could answer. I sat at that table for another 30 minutes. I don't know why. Maybe I was waiting for the miracle. Maybe I was letting the last thread of something, hope, probably unspool completely so I could see exactly how long it was. Exactly how thin. At 8:15, my mother's text arrived. "Sorry, something came up busy tonight." I read it 3 times. Then I stood up, blew out the candles, and started cleaning. I cleaned the way I do everything thoroughly, systematically without stopping. I wrapped the chicken in foil. I poured the mashed potatoes into a container. I washed every dish by hand because the dishwasher hadn't been connected yet. I swept the floor. I pulled down the balloons one by one, and the soft hiss of escaping helium sounded like the house exhaling. I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that. I've seen people describe moments like this, and they always say they cried. I didn't. My body did something else, something flatter. My hands went numb at the fingertips. My chest felt hollow, like someone had reached in and scooped out the center. Not dramatic, just empty. I've since learned there's a clinical term for it. Dr. Renee Hollis, a licensed therapist I started seeing 2 months later, 12 years of practice specializing in family systems and adult children of emotionally neglectful parents, called it effective shutdown. She said, "It's what happens when the emotional system has been overloaded so many times that it stops registering new injuries in real time. Your body knew before your mind did." She told me it had already started protecting you. At 11:48, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Amber, Kevin's girlfriend of about 6 months, standing on my porch holding a grocery store sheet cake in a plastic shell. The frosting said, "Congrats" in blue letters that were already smudging. "Hey," she said. I thought someone should bring something." I let her in because I didn't have the energy to not let her in. We sat in the living room. She ate a piece of cake. I didn't. She told me the house was really cute and asked about the neighborhood. I gave short answers. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in my throat for hours. What came up? What was so important? Amber looked at her Kate. She pressed a crumb flat with her fork. "I don't think anything came up, Madison." Silence. "Kevin was at Darcy's watching the game. Your mom posted on Facebook around 6. She was at some craft fair in Briard. I don't know about your dad." So there it was. Not emergencies, not conflicts, not something came up, just not caring enough. My brother was watching a game. My mother was at a craft fair. My father, who never responded to the original message, was wherever fathers go when they've decided their daughter's life isn't worth the drive. Amber left around midnight. I locked the door, walked upstairs to my bedroom, the room I'd imagined sleeping in for years, and lay on the bare mattress because my sheets were still in a box somewhere. The ceiling was white, perfect, untouched. I stared at it until 3 a.m. And somewhere in those hours, something inside me shifted. Not cracked, shifted like a bone that had been slightly out of alignment for 30 years and finally audibly clicked into place. At 6:14 the next morning, my father texted me, "We need to talk about the house." Not, "Sorry we missed dinner." Not, "Congratulations." Not, "I'm proud of you." "We need to talk about the house." My stomach dropped. Not because I was scared, because I already knew the way you know a storm is coming before the sky changes, that whatever he wanted to talk about wasn't going to be about celebrating what I'd built. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I made coffee in my new kitchen, sat on my porch swing, and watched the oak tree catch the morning light. I breathed. I let the silence do what silence does when you finally stop filling it with other people's noise. Then I called my father back. What he said calmly in that measured, neutral tone he'd perfected over decades of staying technically uninvolved was this. Your mother and I have been talking. We think it's a bit much what you did, buying a house without discussing it with the family. Kevin's been struggling, and seeing you post something like that, it's not sensitive. Madison, we think you should be more mindful of how your choices affect other people. I held the phone away from my ear for a moment. I looked at the oak tree. I looked at my house that I had earned with a decade of work that none of them had ever acknowledged. So I said slowly, you didn't come to dinner because you think I shouldn't have bought a house. That's not what I said. And the reason you're calling me the morning after is not to apologize for not showing up, but to tell me I should feel bad about succeeding because Kevin hasn't. Madison, don't twist. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. When I sent that photo of me on the porch holding the key, did you feel happy for me, even for a second? The silence lasted 4 seconds. I counted. That's not the point, he said. That was my answer. I want to say I handled what came next with grace and maturity. That would be a lie. What I did was go to the hardware store, buy a piece of cedar board and a wood-burning kit, and spend an hour carefully burning the following words. No family discounts, no family visits, no exceptions. I hung it on my front gate. I took a photograph and I posted it to Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter with the caption, "My house, my rules." Was it petty? Probably. Was it dramatic? Absolutely. Was it the most honest thing I'd ever done in 30 years without question? The post went up at 11:30 a.m. on a Sunday. By 6 p.m., it had 4,200 shares. The internet is a strange place. Strangers will sometimes understand you more clearly than the people who raised you. The comments were overwhelming. Not in volume, though there were thousands, but in specificity. People wrote paragraphs. They shared their own stories. The graduations no one attended, the promotions no one acknowledged, the houses and businesses and degrees that were met with silence or resentment by the people who were supposed to celebrate them. One comment from a woman named Teresa in Michigan said, I bought my first house at 34 and my sister told me I was showing off. It took me 5 more years to understand that her discomfort with my success was not my responsibility. That sentence hit me like a truck at 40 miles per hour. I read it 6 times. Meanwhile, my phone was ringing. My mother called 4 times between noon and 3 p.m. I didn't pick up. Kevin texted, "What the hell, Maddie? Take that post down." Then, 20 minutes later, Mom is crying. "Are you happy now?" My father called once at 4:17 p.m. I let it ring. He left a voicemail that I saved and later gave to Dr. Hollis, in which he said, his voice tight with controlled anger, "You are embarrassing this family. This is not how we raised you. If you don't take that down by tonight, your mother and I will have to reconsider our relationship with you. Reconsider our relationship as if they'd ever had one with me in the first place. As if showing up to a dinner, a graduation, a life was something they'd been doing all along, and I was the one rocking the boat." I saved the voicemail. I didn't take the post down. Monday morning, my phone rang at 7:02, a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. "Ms. Carter, my name is Janet Bowl. I'm a reporter with the Asheville Citizen-Times. I saw your post. It's trending locally. Would you be willing to talk about it, Janet Bowl? 11 years in local journalism. Pulitzer nomination in 2019 for a series on Appalachian housing inequality." She wasn't sensational, she was thorough. I said yes. Janet came to the house that Tuesday. She sat on my porch swing, drank coffee from a mug I'd bought at the dollar store, and listened for 90 minutes while I told her everything. Not just the dinner, the decade, the savings, the sacrifice, the family that treated my ambition like an inconvenience and my success like an insult. She asked for documentation. I gave her everything. Bank statements showing a decade of consistent deposits. The closing documents from Diane Prescott's office, pay tabs from my IT jobs, the screenshots of the family group chat, my invitation, their non-responses, the texts afterward, my father's voicemail, Kevin's messages, all of it. Janet's article ran the following Thursday. The headline, "She saved for a decade, bought her dream home, and her family didn't show up. Then the internet did. It went viral within 12 hours. Here's where things escalated beyond anything I could have predicted. After the article, I started getting messages not from strangers this time, but from people in my family's orbit, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Old family friends, people who had watched the dynamics play out for decades and never said anything. My cousin Rachel, my father's brother's daughter, someone I'd been close to as a child before the families drifted apart, sent me a long email. I read it sitting at my kitchen table at 10 p.m. on a Friday night, and by the time I finished, my hands were trembling. Rachel told me things I'd never known. She told me that my parents had taken out a $15,000 loan to help Kevin with a down payment on a condo 3 years earlier, a condo he'd defaulted on within 18 months. She told me that my mother had organized a surprise party for Kevin's 30th birthday at a restaurant that cost $2,200 paid for by my parents. She told me that when I'd graduated from college, my parents had told extended family that I'd finally finished as though it had taken me longer than expected. When in fact, I'd graduated on time with a 3.7 GPA while working 25 hours a week. But the part that made my chest tighten, the part I had to read standing up, because sitting felt like drowning, was this. Your mom told my mom about 2 years ago that she was worried about you. She said you were obsessed with this house idea and that it was unhealthy. She said she hoped you wouldn't actually buy one because it would make Kevin feel worse about himself. Madison, she literally hoped you would fail so Kevin wouldn't feel bad. I put my phone down. I walked to the bathroom. I ran cold water over my wrists, a trick Dr. Hollis had taught me for when anxiety turns physical. I stood there for 5 minutes breathing, letting the water run, letting the truth settle into the exact shape it had always been. But I'd been too loyal to see. My mother hadn't missed my dinner because she was busy. She'd missed it because she resented the reason for it. I forwarded Rachel's email to Dr. Hollis. We had an emergency session that Monday, video call 7:30 a.m. before my work shift. Dr. Hollis didn't seem surprised. She rarely did. That was one of the things I appreciated about her. She treated revelations not as shocks, but as puzzle pieces clicking into existing patterns. Madison, what you're describing is a well-documented family dynamic, she said. In family systems theory, we call it the identified patient model. But in your case, it's inverted. You're not the family member who's struggling and being scapegoat for it. You're the family member who's succeeding, and the family system can't accommodate that because it threatens the existing hierarchy. She paused. Your brother Kevin is what we'd call the golden child, not because he's successful, but because his dependency serves your parents' need to be needed. Your success doesn't just challenge Kevin, it challenges their entire identity as parents. If you can thrive without them, what does that say about the help they gave Kevin? I thought about that for a long time. It says the help didn't help. I said, it says the help was never about Kevin at all. She said the crisis peak came on a Wednesday, 6 weeks after the dinner. I was at work. I'd been promoted to a senior systems administrator role by then. $74,000 a year, full benefits. When I got a call from a number I recognized, it was Thomas Dunlap, the real estate attorney who'd handled my closing. 15 years in real estate law partner at Dunlap and Faraday. Madison, I need to ask you something and I don't want you to panic. My stomach hit the floor. Has anyone in your family recently made inquiries about your property deed? What I got a call this morning from an attorney in Raleigh named Craig Beller. He's representing your parents. He wanted to know if there were any irregularities in your closing, specifically whether any family funds were used in the down payment that might create a claim of equitable interest. I couldn't speak for a moment. The office fluorescent lights felt too bright. My co-worker in the next cubicle was eating chips. The normality of everything around me felt violent against what I was hearing. Thomas, my parents didn't give me a single dollar. Not for the house, not for college, not for anything. I know your file is clean. I told Mr. Beller that, and I told him any further inquiries would need to come through formal channels. But Madison, they're fishing, and the fact that they hired an attorney to fish means this isn't casual. I hung up. I sat at my desk for 14 minutes without moving. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up every bank statement I had going back to 2013 and began organizing them chronologically in a shared drive. At 5:15 p.m., I drove directly to Thomas Dunlap's office. He stayed late. We spent 2 hours going through my financial history line by line. Every deposit, every transfer, every paycheck. This is ironclad, Thomas said. There is zero ambiguity. This house was purchased entirely with your own documented income. If they try to file a claim, they'll lose, and they'll likely face sanctions for a frivolous filing. Why would they do this? I asked, even though I already knew. Thomas looked at me over his reading glasses. In my experience, because they can't stand that it's yours. I retained Thomas formally the next day. He sent a cease and desist letter to Craig Beller, certified mail dated and filed, stating that any claim to my property was baseless and that further action would be met with a counterclaim for harassment and abuse of process. But I didn't stop there. I called Janet Bowl. I told her what had happened. She was quiet for a long time, then said, "Madison, are you willing to go on record?" Yes, all of it. The legal threat, the family emails, the financial records, every word. Janet's follow-up article ran 2 weeks later. It included quotes from Thomas Dunlap. It included a statement from Craig Beller's office saying his clients had no further comment at this time. It included Rachel's account given with her consent. It included a timeline of my savings history, verified against tax records I'd voluntarily provided. The headline, "Family of Dream Home Buyer Attempted Legal Claim on Property She Earned Alone." That article didn't just go viral, it detonated. The consequences came fast. Craig Beller dropped my parents as clients within a week. According to Thomas Beller, cited reputational concerns, which is, lawyers speak for, "I don't want my name attached to this dumpster fire." My mother's craft fair business, she sold handmade candles online and at local markets, lost its entire following within days. Her Etsy reviews were flooded. She had to shut down the shop. I didn't orchestrate that, and I didn't celebrate it, but I didn't warn it either. Kevin called me. The first time he'd called, not texted, since the night of the dinner. He was drunk. It was 1:30 a.m. His voice was thick, wavering between anger and something that might have been shame if he'd known what to do with it. "You ruined everything, Madison. You know that, right? Mom won't stop crying. Dad's not talking to anyone. You blew up this family over a dinner." "No, Kevin," I said. "I blew up a family that hoped I would fail." He was quiet for a long time. "That's not true," he said. But his voice broke on the last word, and we both knew he didn't believe it. I hung up. I turned my phone off. I went to bed. The next morning, I blocked all 3 of their numbers. Not out of anger, out of peace. There's a difference. My father sent a letter 3 weeks later, an actual paper letter, handwritten, mailed to my house, the house he'd never visited. Thomas Dunlap reviewed it first, as I'd asked him to review any family communications during the legal dispute. Thomas called me. "It's not a legal document, it's personal. Do you want to read it?" I did. My father's handwriting was small and careful, the way it always was. The letter was 2 pages. It said in various ways that he was sorry that he hadn't understood how his silence had felt, that my mother's behavior was not something he agreed with, but that he'd failed to intervene, that he was proud of me, that he always had been. I read it twice. I put it in a drawer. Dr. Hollis asked me how I felt about it. "I believe he's sorry," I said. "But being sorry and changing are different things, and I've spent 30 years waiting for change that never comes. What do you want to do?" "Nothing. For now, I want to do nothing and see how that feels." It felt like freedom. The months that followed were the quietest and fullest of my life. I didn't reconcile with my family. I didn't shut the door permanently either. I just stopped performing, stopped reaching, stopped setting tables for people who wouldn't come. And in the space that opened up, other people arrived. My neighbor Dale, a retired electrician, 72 years old, showed up on my porch one Saturday morning with a pecan pie and said, "I read about you in the paper." My daughter went through something similar. Welcome to the street. A woman from my office named Priya started coming over for weekend coffee. Then her husband, then their kids, then another neighbor. Then a woman from my running group who'd just gone through a divorce and needed somewhere to sit that wasn't her empty apartment. The kids on the block started coming by after school. I don't know how it started. I think one of them saw me setting up my laptop on the porch and asked what I was doing. I said coding. They asked if I could teach them. I said, sure. Within a month, I had 4 kids sitting on my porch every Tuesday and Thursday learning basic Python on borrowed Chromebooks. I taught them loops, variables, simple games. One of them, a 12-year-old named Marcus who reminded me so much of myself at Hurt, built a functioning calculator in 3 weeks. He showed his mom. She cried. She brought me tamales. I cried. That's the thing nobody tells you about building a life for yourself. It doesn't stay empty. If you build it with honesty, the right people find their way in, not because you beg them, not because you set a perfect table and held your breath. They come because the door is open and the light is on, and you're not performing, you're just there. 7 months after the dinner that no one came to, I hosted another one. Same table, same candles, different flowers, sunflowers this time because Dale told me they lasted longer. The roast chicken recipe improved. A new playlist, still jazz, but I'd added some Afrobeat because Priya's husband said it was better cooking music. And he was right. 8 people came: Dale, Priya, and Raj. Marcus and his mom, Elena. 2 women from my running group, a quiet guy named James from the neighborhood who'd fixed my mailbox without being asked and whom I'd invited on impulse. We ate, we talked, we laughed so loudly that Dale's hearing aid whistled and he pretended to be offended. Marcus tried the lemon tart and declared it busting, which I'm told is the highest compliment a 12-year-old can give. At 10 p.m., everyone was still there. Nobody was checking the time. Nobody was making excuses. The house was warm, not from the oven, not from the candles, but from the specific, irreplaceable warmth that comes from people who actually want to be where they are. I stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment, holding a dish towel, watching the table, and I thought about that first Saturday night. The cold chicken, the sagging balloons, the silence that felt like a verdict. And I understood something I couldn't have understood then. The house was never a test. It wasn't something my family needed to pass. It wasn't proof of my worth or a measure of their love. It was just a house, a building, 4 walls and a roof and a 70-year-old oak tree. What made it matter wasn't the key. It was the people inside it and the painful, necessary process of learning which people deserved to be there. The first night, my house held absence. This night, it held belonging.